Well, I would like to say hello to everybody, all our friends, and of course I would like to thank you and thank the Foreign Policy Association very sincerely for the honor it has seen fit to bestow on me. However, I feel that this medal, rather than a recognition to any personal merit of mine, it is a tribute to the people of my country. The history of Chile, of the sorrow of its past, and of the rekindling of hope are theirs. It is them, men and women of Chile, who recovered democracy and placed our country on its road to development and a more equal society. Their merit is theirs. It is also them who decided that Chile should, for the first time in its history, have a woman president. So this medal has been given to me by friends of Chile in the United States, a country with which we have, over the years, shared a common desire for democracy, respect for individual liberties, progress, and peace. And in my particular case, it's a country where I have lived twice. First, when I was 12, and that's why my friends at the table were a little bit amazed, because I knew the national anthem. It's because I learned it when I was 12 at school in Bethesda. In the junior high it was called, so in that time, now there are middle schools. And when I came in June, I went to visit my old school. So it was very interesting to talk to the American children and tell them that any one of them could be sometime in the future a president of their country or some other countries. And that was because of the wonderful education I received here. I had also the experience, now as a mother, and my children came with me, to be a year at the Inter-American Defense College studying continental defense. That was in 97, 98. So this is obviously a very, I would say, a country which I am very fond of. And I have had the privilege to live here and to know wonderful American people. So I'm very happy, and I feel very recognized by this medal. In Chile, we have also shared your pain in the face of terrorism and its criminal attacks on this country. We have felt deeply for you, just as many of you felt for us and gave us your support when Chile was in the grips of state terrorism. That period, 30 years ago, was the darkest chapter in Chile's history. Democracy and tolerance succumbed to political violence, and on September 21, 1976, a terrorist attack planned in Santiago and carried out in Washington, D.C., cost the lives of Orlando Letelier, a former Chilean government minister, and his assistant, Ronnie Carpen-Moffett. 5 years ago, terrorist violence was also unleashed on the United States, killing thousands of innocent people and making appallingly clear how much more dangerous fanaticism is when armed with modern technology. It is difficult for me to describe the horror we felt in Chile on September 11th. Because of our own history, terrorism in any shape or form is anathema to us. That is why we felt so deeply for you and so united in the defense of life, democracy, and human rights, a task that can be accomplished only if we use legitimate means and if we are coherent with the same values we are defending. Fortunately, my friends, the Chile of today is very different and better country from that of 30 or even 16 years ago. But we have not forgotten a valuable lesson of the past. It taught us that democracy is both a means and an end in itself, and that there is nothing politically or ideologically which can justify the violation of human rights, the overthrow of the rule of law, and the use of violence to resolve society's differences. We also learned that rather than clinging to models or ideologies, democracy should be steering by the rudder of its citizens' welfare. It should mean tangible improvements in their daily lives, and especially of those who are poorest. That is what in Chile we mean when we talk about the democracy of growth with equality. The results of the last 16 years are encouraging. Chile's GDP has increased almost fourfold, rising from $31.6 billion in 1990 to $115.3 billion last year. Over the same period, per capita income has increased in purchasing power terms from about $4,000 to $11,000, and according to the IMF, International Monetary Fund, will reach over $12,000 this year. But most importantly, since the return of democracy, we have, for the first time in Chile's history, started to achieve a systematic and sustained reduction in poverty. This has dropped to 18%, down from 40% in the 90s, in 1990. In other words, it has more than halved and is continuing to fall. We have increased social spending, particularly on healthcare and education, and economic and social success has served to strengthen the legitimacy of Chile's democracy, which in 2005 completed its long period of institutional consolidation. Today, Chile faces new challenges. As a country, we are moving on to a new stage of development as we seek to build a society that is truly based on equality of opportunity. Because despite all its progress, Chile is still one of the most unequal countries of the world, most unequal region. That is why one of my government's key aims is to eradicate the different types of discrimination that have historically plagued our society, and to introduce institutional reforms that permit real equality of opportunity for all Chile's inhabitants. In a bid to achieve this, we have drawn up an ambitious program that seeks to strengthen political and social rights, including a system of social protection from birth to old age that will guarantee access to child care and nursery schooling, to high-quality primary, secondary, and higher education, to decent jobs, a fitting standard of health care, and a minimum pension. We know that economic growth and fiscal discipline are essential, but on their own, they're not enough. We must also implement powerful public policies and ensure long-term social stability and the legitimacy of democracy. My government is committed to keeping Chile on its high growth track, hence the importance we attach to fiscal responsibility and our decision to further strengthen and regulate Chile's structural budget surplus policy and to deepen the country's capital markets. In addition, we're working to boost innovation, entrepreneurship, and the competitiveness of small and mid-sized enterprises, and to promote the development of clusters in industries such as agriculture, forestry, mining, and fishing. Development cannot be measured only in economic terms. Economic security does not exist without legal, institutional, political, and social security. All these areas are inextricably intertwined. That is the message that Chile's democratic governments have been at pains to communicate since 1990. My friends, 6 of every $10 earned by Chileans have their origin in foreign trade and investment by overseas companies. And the figure is growing by the day. That is why in the coming years, Chile is going to be ever more involved and have an ever greater presence in international affairs. My country's foreign policy seeks to contribute to the governance of globalization. We are firmly committed to progress toward an international system that is more just and more democratic, to the strengthening of multilateral organizations, and to the rule of international law. Within this context of international insertion, Chile's integration with other Latin American countries is a strategic priority. However, let me be frank, the situation in Latin America is complex and contradictory. On the one hand, we have seen the consolidation of democracy, peace, and strategic stability accompanied by strong growth, trade surpluses, and increasing intra-regional trade. On the other hand, the number of poor people continues to increase and in 2005 reached 220 million. That explains why so many Latin Americans are increasingly disenchanted with the democracy it cost them so much to recover in the 80s. After the important progress achieved in the 90s and through to the beginning of the century, the process of regional integration has also run into difficulties. That is partly due to the legitimate right of some countries to regulate liberalization so as to minimize its cost, but also to difficulties in complying with agreements and, in some cases, a backward shift to attitude that view free trade with mistrust. The result is the stagnation of progress of the region on many fronts, especially as compared to the emerging economies of East Asia and the Pacific region. What then should be our guiding principles? Our job is to ensure that government economic programs are at the service of our people, not the other way around. In designing public policies, we must never forget that Latin America is burdened with the world's highest level of inequality. We have learned that inequality is not something that can be banished from one day to the next. The right conditions must first be created through the process we sometimes refer to as leveling the playing field. And indeed, the playing field must be leveled. But that is not the only task. We also have to ensure that all our citizens have access to the playing field, and that once there, they have the skills needed to compete. That is the equality we seek. And here, in areas like education, healthcare, or access to new technologies, our governments have an important role to play. Plans for regional integration have frequently become entangled in rhetoric and lofty, if ultimately unrealistic, goals, when what is required, if we are to achieve ambitious goals, is basic hard work. As integrated Latin America will not be built overnight, but it can and should be built. Global and regional trade is not a zero-sum game. We can and should reach bilateral and multilateral agreements with international partners, but at the same time, we can and should strengthen regional ties. That is precisely what Chile is doing. While expanding our network of free trade agreements to include countries like China, we have also accepted the invitation to become an associate member of the Andean community. We would also like to see convergence between the Mercosur trade bloc and other South American economies, with a view not only to boosting intra-regional trade, but also to modernizing the infrastructure necessary for physical integration, connecting the continent's Atlantic and Pacific coast, and increasing South America's trade with Asia-Pacific, Europe, North America, and other regions of the world. That path has taught us that strength lies in unity. That is why integration is so vital for a region composed of small and middle-sized powers. But the present also teaches us that although dreams are important, pragmatism is no sin if it seeks to help our people live healthier and happier lives. This may sound trivial, but it's not. These sentiments were shared by our founders, the Libertadores of Latin America, who knew there could be no freedom without democracy and no democracy without unity. As we approach the bicentenary of many of our republics in the 2010, including my own, we are mindful and hopeful of that unachieved but achievable Latin American dream. Friends of the Foreign Policy Association, I cannot finish these remarks without saying how much I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening, to share with you some thoughts about my country, and to reaffirm Chile's ties with your beautiful country, where I have been, as I already said, lucky enough to live and study at different stages of my life, and for which, like so many Chileans, I have a deep and abiding affection and gratitude. Thank you.
President Bachelet has agreed to answer questions. We have collected a few that our President's relative will read and pose to the President.
We have several questions relating to pension reform. Chile has a social security pension system based on defined contributions. Many Americans, including President Bush, believe we should have a similar social security system. Is it working well, or do you intend to reform your system in Chile?
Definitely. I have defined for a 4-year period with no re-election 4 big structural changes, transformation. And one is the reform of a second level of reform for educational reform. So we improve quality, and we improve pre-scholar access to school. But the second reform is the pension reform. And we've been with the pension system since 26 years. And even though it has, I would say, it has been very positive in some areas, for the capital market, for example, it hasn't been working well for the pension for the people. And that's not a detail. So we are going to make a reform. We are working on it. I called to a commission for reform of the pension system. Many people from many different perspectives, many political ideas. Some people with a lot of expertise in pension system and security, social security system, and they made a proposal to me. And now I have a committee of ministers who are analyzing these proposals, and we will pass some bills in order to reform the pension system. But the main idea is the following, because we are defining right now exactly which reform we will send a bill to the Congress. The main idea is, first of all, to be able to guarantee all Chileans, of course all Chileans who have work, but we will try to be a lot more ambitious and to hopefully give any Chilean basic universal pension. I mean, to all of them, a basic pension. And so that will be the state responsibility, fiscal responsibility. But on the other hand, people who works already, we all of us contribute to our pensions. So we are thinking in a mixed system where you can have a very important solidarity fiscal expenditure. Is that right, the word? For people who doesn't have enough money or who cannot have all the conditions to have a pension, even though they have work and they are poor. But on the other hand, people should continue contributing to their own pension, so they will get higher and bigger pensions. We also need to solve the women issue, because in our country, after a woman has worked her entire life and has done the same work or has had the same salary of a man, for example, a women teacher or a man teacher, because we live longer. Of course, our pension is smaller. And so we have different different calculating system for men and women for her or his retirement. So we are working on different alternatives so we can help women, not only because they have worked the same and they had the same fund, they have the same contribution fund after her entire life, but also because women in countries like Chile still work, but also are in charge of her family, with the kids and the children. And we're working on conciliating programs so women can conciliate better labor and family and children or whatever. So many times women, I don't know if in the United States it probably be similar, they do not work as long as men, and we in Chile, women must be 60 years old to have the right to retire, and men 65, and you have to have some amount of years, 20 years minimum, so they have, they could retire before, but it's less money. So we are working on that, how we can make a system that is really applies to the Chilean society today, because we have a lot of different activities like fishery, or people who works in buses or taxis or whatever, and they informal kinds of employment, and they don't have any pension. So we're working on trying to look at the labor conditions in our country on one side, to the gender issues on the other side, to the density also of the contribution and so on, so we can have a better system. We have studied different systems. We have studied European systems that are pretty well organized, and we're trying to do our best to have a system where people who are poor could have a dignified pension, but also it will be very important the individual contribution in order to guarantee his or her pension. And we're also working on how we can increase competence between the administrator of the pension system. It's a private sector, and we need to I would say, promote more competitiveness also between them. So we're working in different areas, and my commitment to my country is that during this second semester I will send those bills. So I don't know who asked that, but I'll promise we'll send you our project of law. Thank you.
Madam President, can you explain your program for using a reserve copper fund to stabilize Chile's economy?
Well, I think it's a wonderful idea, but to be honest and frank, it wasn't our idea. The Norwegians from Norway, they did it before with oil funds. Well, we have, in our country, we have decided, and we have passed a bill on fiscal responsibility. Tomorrow I have to enact it. That's why we are leaving immediately after the dinner. But I would change my clothes because it wouldn't be appropriate to enact a law like this. We have decided in our country that we will have a structural surplus of 1%, fiscal surplus of 1%. But copper prices have been pretty high, so now we have a huge fund. And we all know that economies go well and sometimes they don't go well, and we all know that a commodity as copper sometimes have a high price and sometimes the price is at a low. So the temptation could be to use all that money in social programs. But then what do you do afterwards when the economy is not going as well as you want to? So we decided to not only have this fiscal surplus, but also to assure counter-cyclic measures, so you will have in that fund money enough when copper is not that good and the economy is not that good, and you will use it for two reasons, because we have two kinds of funds. One is the pension assistance fund, because our estimation is that around 2012, 2015, we will have a huge amount of pension people, retirements. And we will need a lot of money in that time to be able to assure what that burden will be in the fiscal budget. So we will have that fund, so we will be able, independent how economy develops, to really do what we have to do and have the money for the pensions. But on the other hand, we have another fund that's called for social and economical, I would say, sustainable policies. So we will also, even though the economy goes bad, not good, we will have the money to sustain our policies. So that's why, even though our fiscal budget for next year that we will send to the Congress on next Friday, not tomorrow, in a week, will be very expensive, the more expensive in maybe the last 10 years. Even though that, we're saving a lot of money in these funds because we want to be very responsible, and we know that our economy, as a small country, sometimes depends on many other factors, and that's what we're working. The Norwegians did it pretty well with petrol, and we hope that our copper will help us, not only for us now, but also for our grandsons and granddaughters. Thank you.
Madam President, this is a more personal question. What are the biggest challenges you have faced as a woman in your role and position?
Should I just list one, or can I make a long list? I think probably the challenge that any woman had when we work, and everybody is trying to see if you are capable or not, if you have enough skills and qualification and so on. Because but it probably happens in any country, probably Evo Morales, as an indigenous for the first time in his country, is also facing the same kind of thing. That at the beginning, some people are, this is a joke, suspicious. What can a woman do? Can she be tough enough when it has to be tough? Or is anybody going to convince her and she will do? Or the other thing is, and some people tell me in the street, don't let them tell you what to do. And there is this sort of fantasies, and but other than that, I think it's the same challenges of any president, because the main challenges are to do what we want to do, to be able to have the capabilities, the strength, the skills, but also, I would say, the commitment. I mean, I'm not talking about myself, but the whole government. Because one person is important, but you need to have a whole team that works with the same spirit. And that's probably one of the more difficult things when you have a very long country, when you have a lot of politically appointed positions. I mean, we don't elect governors, and we don't elect intendente as governors? Governors, yes. We only elect mayors and, of course, our senators and representatives. So you need to be able to give to all this big group the energy, the enthusiasm in working all the tasks. So I would say I think it's an interesting experience, but it's also an interesting experience because when you come to the United States, and we were at that dinner in Washington, D.C. with so many women. And it was Gina Davis, the one who made the presentation and so on, because I said, congratulations, first woman president in the United States. And she told me, but you're the real one, I'm just fake it. And, but anyway, when you hear those women, and they said, you cannot fail, eh? We're all after you are looking this experience. So it is a challenge, but on the other hand, it has been a wonderful experience. And probably the more important challenge is, can a woman president, a female president, be a president and still be a woman? what I mean, I'm not talking about love things or that kind of things. I'm talking, do women have a different leadership style? I think that we do. But usually women who get involved in politics use men codes, and men kinds of leadership. There are some different leaderships. And I think that's one of the challenges. Is it possible to be a president and have all the conditions with your own way of doing it? So that's interesting, but we can talk about it for more years. And I can tell you the experience, my experience. Thank you.
Lastly, Madam President, a foreign policy question. What can the United States do to improve its image in and relations with Latin America?
Oh my God. No, I'm just trying to put some order in my thoughts. One thing that could be really useful is the word empathy. Empatia, how you say empatia? Empathy. In life, I found that empathy is a very good quality. In Spanish, we said, try to put the shoes of the other people in your own feet. Try to understand the position of the other country or person. When I studied in the Inter-American Defense College, we had classes about crisis resolution, peace negotiations, and so on. And teachers always teach you, try to understand and not to hear what they say, because words are something, but what are the real problems that are behind those words? Try to read deeply, because that's where you can find what's troubling the relation, and you can try to solve whatever needs to be solved. Sometimes from the South, we have the feeling that not always in bigger countries, not only in the United States, understand that Latin America is diverse. We have we have a lot of things in common. We have a history in common. We have a common culture. Besides Brazil, that has a lot of the language, we have a common language. But we do have a lot of challenges, same dilemmas. How we grow with equality, what I tried to say in my former remarks, speech. But in order to see how anyone can find their solutions, have to understand that each country has different political tradition. Some have weaker institutions, some have stronger institutions. Some have high level of corruption, some do not have it. Some have governments with strong coalitions. Some are governments that are very weak in terms of the power that they have in parliament and so on. So some have, as I told you in my remarks, I think all of us made economical reforms, but at the end of the day, what happened is that today Latin American population is more poor than before. So that is what makes some people don't believe in those kind of economical models. So I think that in order to have good relations is to, first of all, respect the differences. I'm not saying you don't do it. I'm just saying what I think must be done. Try to understand what's going on, but deeply. Not titles, not on the surface. Try to know much more in a deep perspective what's going on in each country, and find, including with the hardest one, areas of cooperation, of collaboration. With some hard but weaker people, you can embrace them. I always tell the Europeans and so on, when they ask me about some countries, and I tell them, the worst thing that you can do with somebody who looks like having conflicts or problem is to isolate them. Because it's like when the militaries are being attacked, you know, we have learned it from the cowboys movies, you know, when the Indians attack, they're all put together in a round circle, and they got very strong, very rigid, and nobody moves them from there. So if you need somebody to move to a different direction, I think sometimes it's better to embrace, to collaborate, to open different areas of cooperation and collaboration. I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that it's always possible. Sometimes it is impossible. But I think that will really help to get to know us much better. And I think it would be a very interesting thing. Chile has collaborating for so long with the United States. And so we have a different position in that. We are very comfortable in this very good relation. But also Chile has had a different history than, I mean, talking about political history, economical history than other countries. So that's what I think I could share with you tonight. Probably there's much more to do. But I think that that's an important issue that the Foreign Policy Association can do. And to help also, as you are already doing all this time, to get people from the United States to get to know better the Latin American countries. One very important thing, by the way, we in the innovation goals that we had defined a goal that we hope that someday 100% of the Chileans, of the young people of course, will have English skills, because we think in this modern world that's important. And for that goal we have been sending our teachers to English-speaking languages here too, and you are sending us students or teachers to teach English there. So they spend 6 months or a year, and they get to know our countries pretty well, and we get to know your people pretty well. And so I think we have to think in many different initiatives. Not only one will make the difference, but I think a lot of different possibilities will help a lot. Thank you.